Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Muhammad Memphis. I'm currently a sophomore from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a prospective political science and environmental studies major. Some of my research interests include the political, legal developments of everything from civil rights to criminal justice, environmental issues. And it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Beverly Wright. Dr. Beverly O. Wright, environmental justice scholar and advocate, author, civic leader, and professor of sociology, is the founder of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, currently at Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana. The center addresses environmental and health inequities along the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor and is a community university partnership organization providing education, training, and job placement for underserved populations and environmental justice communities within the United States. After the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the center has focused its energies largely on research and policy efforts, community outreach and assistance, as well as the education and training of displaced African American and minority residents of New Orleans. Most recently, Dr. Wright has directed the focus of the center's activities on education, training, and public policy needs and concerns of those affected by the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill disaster. Dr. Wright is the accomplished author of numerous scholarly works and articles. Recently, she authored 2 books with Dr. Robert Bullard, Race, Place, and the Environment After Hurricane Katrina from Westview Press, and most recently, The Wrong Complexion for Protection, How the Government Responds Endangers African American Communities from the New York University Press. Dr. Wright continues to serve as a strong voice in the grassroots environmental justice movement. It's my pleasure to welcome her here today. Thank you all.
Thank you. Wow. I feel like a celebrity up here. First, I want to say good evening, and thank you for bringing me back to this kind of weather. I went to SUNY at Buffalo. That's where I got my PhD from and was there for blizzards and all that cool stuff. So I'm really happy to be here. I learned a little bit more about Williams College. I think this is my first time on this campus, and I understand Dr. Bullard is coming in tonight. That's my partner in crime for 40 years. I can't believe Bob is that old, you know? Not me, but him, right? His hair is silver. Mine will be forever black. And you know why. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about, in a way that I haven't done in a long time. I'm going to try to introduce you to the history of the EJ movement, really how we got where we are and what are some of the effects of that movement on our lives in general and where we are today, because in working with young people, I just really realized that I'm talking and they're like, what? They don't know what I'm talking about. That happened like 30 years ago or so. And they're starting today, and I'm like 30 years ago. So it helps to put things in context. So this is a presentation that I haven't done in a while, and I'm actually excited to do it again. So thank you for inviting me. So I want to start off by introducing you to the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor, because that's where I'm from, and that's where my work actually began. And I wanted to just get your mind, put you in a sort of mindset like where I was growing up as a kid. So I lived in New Orleans. I had relatives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is about 60 miles away. And so my father would often put us in the car to go visit my auntie, as we called her, in Baton Rouge. And it was a really kind of weird ride, because on our way to Baton Rouge, we would just run across different, just horrible scents. You know, they would rotten egg scents, you name it, as we would continue to drive. They would change, but they were all smelly and horrible. And we would tease one another in the car like, oh, you did it, you know, somebody flatulated, as we would say. It was just all fun and games. And then on the way back at night, would usually fall asleep, or we'd lie back in the car and you could see the sky, and it almost looked like you were in outer space. There were so many lights, and we thought it was beautiful. So my dad would say when we'd pass a smelly place and we'd just complain about it, he would say, smells like money, which was the attitude about the plants at that time. That scent meant money. It meant jobs. It meant prosperity, and so on. And it took us a long time to realize that there were a lot of consequences for that particular prosperity, and that's what I'm going to introduce you to. So the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor is an 85-mile stretch of land along the Mississippi River from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, if that gives you an idea of where it is. So that one stretch is only 85 miles long, but it's home to 136 petrochemical plants and 7 oil refineries, and produces about 1/4 of the nation's petrochemicals. This is an aerial view of it, so you can see just how densely populated that area is. And you can see that 37% of the population of Louisiana actually lives along this corridor. So it's the most densely populated area of the state as well. And this is another view, so you can just see. But what I'd like you to see here is that we're looking at the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor, and you see names of towns, small towns all around. So they're interspersed with all of these plants. But what is really frightening is when you then look at this map, which tells you all the chemicals that are produced in these spaces where these communities are. And there are multiple chemicals that community persons are exposed to at the same time in this corridor. And Louisiana is really a beautiful place. You know, it's known as a sportsman's paradise. People come to go kayaking and all of this, and I tell them, if you see anything lumpy in the water, you should be suspicious. It's most likely human feces. All of our waters are contaminated, all of them in Louisiana, and EPA has been warning us about this for a long time. And so when did this all begin? And it began in the 1940s with the petrochemical companies coming in, developing partnerships with the farmers. So we went from plantation to plant. So most of the plants are on land that used to be plantations where slaves were. And so it was really an easy transformation from the plantation to the plant because of access to waterways that allowed them to ship all of their goods. It was just perfect. And then you add to that, we had the right soil, the right water, the right everything for producing oil and moving it along. But things really got bad. A lot of people don't realize that Richard Nixon actually did a few good things. Tricky Dick, as we called him in my day. But he actually did some things. He actually was really behind the passing of a number of laws that protect our environment right now and that are under attack by our present administration. And so the National Environmental Policy Act was passed in 1969. And then in 1970, it was President Nixon who basically became very angry with corporations. People were literally dropping dead on the street in New York City from smog. The smog was so bad. I mean, these corporations were out of control. So, you know, it must have really been out of control if Nixon was angry about it, and he really was. And then in 1970, he passed, the Clean Air Act was passed. In 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed. So those were some really good things that happened under the Nixon administration. And this should be changed now to 47 years later. It's hard to think of a place where the mission of environmental protection has failed more miserably than in Louisiana, Cancer Alley. So this is a picture of the marshlands that generally protect us from hurricanes. And if you ever fly into New Orleans, I really would like you to look out the window and you can see how few trees are there anymore. When I went away to school in Buffalo in 1969, it would be miles and miles of marshland. now it's like, it looks like it's a half block long. And that's why we're in such danger right now, as well as the fact that climate change is making these storms more severe. So national environmental laws established a process-based regulatory system. And what does that mean? It means, first of all, that they don't ban pollution. They don't set binding limits on discharges. With this being the case, the Cancer Alley began to grow. So I've tried to find out from the Department of Environmental Quality, how do you determine the limits of pollution allowed in the air? Because it's not a health-based standard. If it were a health-based standard, we would really have some protection. You know what it's based on? It's based on the first chemical company that was placed in Louisiana and the levels of pollution they needed to make a profit. Can you imagine that? I think I was like, I found this out about 5 or 6 years ago. We're constantly asking them questions, and then we find out, well, so it's just about profit, it's not about health. So whatever it takes, the limits that allow companies to make a profit, that's the limit. It has nothing to do with your health. That's great news, isn't it? And so looking at the chemical corridor, of course it continued to grow. And then you place this attitude inside of the context of a deep southern state where people who look like me are not valued. And so you're able to perpetuate a system that not only harms the environment, but harms people as well. And so you have the Louisiana facilities were heavily recruited by state and local governments, and I needn't tell you about the corruption in government in Louisiana. We have that reputation. It's true. Cooperative agreements were written to support growth of the oil and gas industry, guaranteeing low taxes, low wages, a non-union labor force, and a lack of industry regulation. And oh, by the way, we discovered something else, that the legislatures had well, I call them parish leaders. That would be, we call them parishes, you call them wards, I think. So the parish leaders had the chemical industry to sign agreements saying that they would not hire African Americans at the plants because they needed them to pick rice, sugarcane, and cotton. So black people didn't benefit at all from the high wage jobs that came with the oil industry, although they certainly suffered from all of the pollution at a rate that's higher than their white counterparts. So the Mississippi River flourished while communities perished. Industry leaders called this area the chemical corridor, responsible for turning small homes into brick homes and shopping centers. In other words, prosperity, as my father did. And this is what Dow Chemical Corporation looks like at night. Remember I told you it looked like outer space to us as kids? It really does. It's actually beautiful when you see all the lights. But locals call it Cancer Alley. And the industry gets really upset when you call it that. They don't believe that that's true. Well, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and when I went to MD Anderson Hospital and talked to the people there, she said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Louisiana." She said, "Oh, we get a lot of them from there." And the statistics show that. Now, I'm not saying that my breast cancer was caused by this. I don't know what it was caused by. The doctors told me it was caused by being a female because I produce estrogen. I'm like, really, sir? Really? Right, so I want to see, how do you get men without women who produce estrogen? No births, right? So when I first moved back home, this area was called a vast human experiment because 800 million pounds of toxins were being released every year into the air, water, and soil. And our fight in Louisiana began trying to get those numbers reduced. And today they're at 293 million pounds, Mostly because of the work that we did, it's even been lower. But in this new environment, it's on its way back up. So the fight certainly continues. And people who lived here wondered if their health was being compromised by all of this pollution. That's kind of where the movement began in the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor. They were pretty much convinced that it was the chemical plants. So when you begin to notice that all of the small animals are dying, you know, in your neighborhood, if you would go out and shoot rabbit and squirrel, because these were rural areas, they couldn't find them anymore, just the crows, the only birds left. The moss was dying on the trees. People would plant vegetables in the yard. The mustard greens or collard greens would turn black overnight. They didn't know why. They would get strange smells and headaches and throwing up and nosebleeds during the night. They didn't know why. Plants would grow on one side of the house, but on the side downwind from the plant, they wouldn't grow. Frogs had 3 legs and, you know, big tumors on them. In fact, we invited a person from head of EPA down one time, and they caught a fish, and the fish had a big tumor on it, so she was convinced, you know, that there was something going on. And this is not science fiction. This absolutely happened. It sounds like you're not telling the truth, but it really was, and this is what people were living with. And they were tired of it and called for a civil rights hearing, which is where I entered the scene for EJ. And I was asked to testify as to what I had seen. I had gotten in my little mommy van with some students from Xavier, and we rode up and down the Mississippi River Road, as it's called. And when I went back, I told them what I saw. I said, well, it looks like African-American people are living fence line, and white people have been moved out. You know, you can see where houses were, and they are no more, like across the street from the black houses in the neighborhood. And I was stopped, and the person said, well, Dr. Wright, you can't say that. I'm like, really? Well, you have no proof that that's there, that that's really what happened. I said, well, let's see, you are the Environmental Protection Agency. Shouldn't you be telling me what happened? Not accusing me of not telling the truth or not following some protocol. It's like you want to believe me or your lying eyes. Is that old saying? Remember that? So the pattern of sighting that we saw was not a natural phenomenon. It was one created by situations related to racism and discrimination, Jim Crow. So it starts with slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, discrimination, people being completely disenfranchised, and the legal system not responding to the needs of people who look like me. And so you end up with our first GIS mapping, which showed that 90% of people living in the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor in close proximity to toxic facilities were African American, and that's including the city of New Orleans. I was like amazed. I asked my white girlfriend, how do y'all manage to get away from everything and leave us even in a place as small as the city of New Orleans? How is that possible? And I tell people, black people, you need to have at least one white friend, because there's a communication network among white people that we're not included in. And you think I'm kidding, but it's true. For Katrina, my white girlfriend had a special policy. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, I have a rider. And so, you know, she had more insurance than what I did, and I make more money than what she does. I'm like, so how did you find, oh, my insurance person told me about it. I said, well, the next time you hear something, Natalie, call me, please. Because ain't nobody telling us nothing. So you need that good white friend. Y'all laughing, but I'm telling you the truth. So let me get back to this. So this is what, I just love this picture. It's just amazing. This is the chemical corridor, close up and personal. an aerial view of what we're living with. And so while I was dealing in Louisiana, guess what? I found out this wasn't an isolated phenomenon. I thought it was just us, right? But then I began to notice, because we were working with EPA, meeting people in my region, Region 6, in Texas, in New Mexico, you know, all people of color complaining about the same thing. And so from California to Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Texas, everywhere, communities of color were all complaining about the same thing. They were sick and dying because they were being exposed to polluting facilities around the country. And the environmental justice movement really began in about 1982 with this particular incident, Warren County, where young men and boys who laid down in front of these trucks. And Ben Chavis will tell you the women told them to do that. Their grandmothers and mothers told them, lay down here and stop that truck. That's how they ended up lying down in the street to stop all of these trucks that was bringing PCB into a landfill in Warren County, one of the poorest counties in the state of North Carolina. And because of, at this particular demonstration, Dr. Benjamin Chavis and Congressman Fauntleroy, who represented Washington, D.C. at the time, were there, and they were placed in jail. They were handcuffed and jailed. And Fauntleroy asked that a study be done by the General Accounting Office. So that was the first study ever done looking at toxic waste and race, which basically told us what we knew. The majority of it is in the southern area, was in African American communities. That was followed by a 1987 study because the United Church of Christ really bankrolled the environmental justice movement. So if you're looking for a church, can't find one, I always suggest the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, because they have supported civil rights movement. They bankrolled the environmental justice movement for the most part with all of these studies and supporting all of our conferences from the very beginning. The 1987 study showed us just a little bit more of what we already knew. And this study was launched with a press conference. I love this picture because it's real old. That's Benjamin Chavis standing at the mic. And so we began to gather information that supported the anecdotal rattlings of communities about they were sick and where these things were. So that was the beginning of us getting some real work. And then the next thing was this meeting that was held at the University of Michigan, and we were called a Michigan group. It was Dr. Bunyan Brine and Dr. Paul Mohai who organized it. And the United Church of Christ, again, was involved in it. And they looked for researchers that had been doing anything on toxic waste and race. They said they found two. That was me and Dr. Bullard. At that time, maybe one study, maybe two studies that we had done. And we were all invited. So I don't know if you all know Dr. Dorceta Taylor right in the middle. I'm in there someplace. I don't even recognize myself. I don't see. Oh, there I am. Oh, y'all see me? Okay, that's me. A long time ago. And that's Dr. Bullard over here with the glasses on, see? You'll see him tomorrow. He's all gray now. I'm saying that again. And then in 1990 came the Bob's book, Dumping in Dixie. That was followed by the first People of Color Summit in 1991, bankrolled by the United Church of Christ again. And that's all of us demonstrating. It was an unbelievable, about 900 people were there, meeting where we came up with the principles of environmental justice. And that was followed by, so we're getting the attention of the agencies now, right? So now the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which was a hated organization by communities. The Center for Disease Control, they've never found a cancer cluster. I don't care how many people die, they have yet to find a cancer cluster. You know, the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, we call it the paralysis of analysis. You know, when they can never get to the bottom of anything because of all these rules, but people are still sick and dying, right? So you ought to do something. Even if you don't know what caused it, you should do something. At least that's what we were saying, the real radical, crazy academics, as we were defined at the time. And that was followed by the EPA Equity Report. Under a Republican administration, by the way, this report came out, basically saying what we had been saying about people and where they live and the conditions. So communities were sick. Residents believed they were sick because of exposure to chemicals from facilities in their neighborhood. And they wanted to know a few things. They wanted to know, what am I exposed to? How these exposures are affecting our health? What can we do to protect our health? What should the government be doing? And just what the hell is in the air, water, and soil that could be unhealthy? And that's the way communities told it to us, and that's what we wrote down. This is what we want to know. Believe it or not, that's a lot for the government to answer. They really couldn't. So there was an agency respond. 2 agencies responded, NIEHS and EPA. And NIEHS, was it NIEHS? Yes. NIEHS started with this conference, Interagency Health and Research Needs to Ensure Environmental Justice Symposium. They really just wanted to talk to PhDs, you know. EPA, if you weren't a doctor, they didn't want you in the room. It was very hard to get community people in the room, but we did it. So Dr. Wright, Dr. Bullard, I was the only woman in the group, a place I've gotten to be really comfortable in because it continues to happen. So it was me, Dr. Bullard, Dr. Mohai, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Everybody was doctor, forgetting something. When we got in the room with EPA, we refused to talk to them because we wanted community leaders to be in the room. So we held off the conversation until Richard Moore and other EJ leaders were allowed in that room. And out of that conversation came this particular conference that started out, they wanted 75 people to 100. It ended up being about 1,000 people. And white people from Appalachia showed up. Uninvited, you know, it was mostly a people of color movement. And they said, we're sick too. And we said, come on in. And so it ended up being mostly people of color, but also poor white people began to join in our struggle because of exposures and so on. And what this did was cause a shift in a paradigm. And it wasn't an easy shift. The shift basically started, the shift resulted in what we call now community-based participatory research, being a part of everything. That actually came out of the EJ movement, and I like to tell people it also came out of the work that we were doing at my center, a model called Communiversity, because I know now I'm not going to get to all of this in the 40 minutes that I had. And the change occurred because of what we call visionary leadership. Dr. Ken Oden, who was head of NIHS, is a bench scientist. And he did not believe anything that we were saying. And it was an unbelievable meeting with all of us in the room with him, EJ people and him. It was almost a fight between Dr. Bullard and Charles Lee and Ken Oden. All that testosterone got all bundled up in there, and they were standing up and beating on the desk. And I was like, hold it. This is not about you. This is about people who are sick, and you all need to take a seat, and let's start all over again. Now you're getting a backstory. This is the backstory. So we invited Ken Oden to Louisiana and took him on a tour of Cancer Alley, which changed his life. He was totally convinced after that, and he went back and he made unbelievable changes. That's where that shift in the paradigm came, where they did community university partnerships with monies. You know, you had to have real input from communities. And they had to work with it because, of course, universities didn't know how to do that. So a lot of things didn't work out well the first time, but they finally got it right. But he was at the forefront of that. And at that same interagency meeting that we were having, we signed the Environmental Justice Executive Order. And let's see if I can show you where I am. That's me right there. You only see the back of my head because the shortest man in Congress blocked my face. The shortest man in Congress blocked my face at that time. So I'll forever be just the black hair on the side. So we signed the executive order. And then we had Timothy Fields at EPA, who really put the money up for the Office of Environmental Justice to be put in place. He was in the Office of Enforcement. But he started this program, the Hazardous Waste Worker Training Program, where we are still, I've had that grant now for almost 25 years, training young men and women in hazardous waste, which did two things. First of all, it helped communities understand what they were being exposed to. It also dealt with the employment needs and economic needs of communities who were impacted by Superfund sites, which wasn't an easy sell initially, because you're telling people who are being exposed, now let your children go work and all of this stuff, right? But this particular program is all about occupational health and safety, teaching them how to do it correctly. And so this program has been going on now with us for 25 years. We put people to work, and it's made a difference in most of the communities. And here's some examples of the work, the training that they do. And our kids have worked on just about everything, and they've been everywhere. I remember one of the early jobs was when the shuttle blew up, the last shuttle that blew up. People don't think about what has to be retrieved off the ground, which is very dangerous, and some of our young men were called to be involved in that process. And the community response, I'm gonna call it, I just wanna introduce you to one community that began to respond. So we've seen how agencies do, this is community, I'm gonna do it quickly. So this is Narco, Louisiana. This is what it looks like around their homes. Here are the problems, and I want you to remember this picture at the bottom of the scale. So this is a community that's sandwiched between two shell plants. And when I say sandwich, I mean it's fence line, like 18 feet between the front of their house and the big pipes running in front of really, really fence line. And they were subjected to explosions. An old lady was burned up in a house. A young boy was mowing the grass, and a spark caused him to catch on fire and die. These people have had unbelievable trauma because of being fence line between these two shell plants. We started to organize. This is one night. There was no electricity in the house where we were. There's a guy out there holding a lamp, and the mosquitoes were like this big. I still remember. It was an unbelievable experience. And so we had numerous meetings. It's a long story. It took 18 years, by the way, so if you think this is a short fight, think again. And they were introduced to air sampling with a relatively new device that was called the Bucket Brigade at the time, because we're talking about a long time ago. So community people were taught how to take samples. And what basically happened was that, Shell said that there was some steam that was floating around in the community. They said it was steam. The community was able to take samples of it because they'd been working with EPA, and when it was examined, it was MEK. So with it being MEK, a dangerous chemical, EPA's whole attitude towards them began to change. We were working at so many levels. That's another whole lecture about what the process was. Even going to the stockholders meetings in the Netherlands, meeting with the Royal Dutch Queen of Shell, right? I mean, it was just a whole lot of work that was being done, but the thing that really happened was being able to collect those samples and show that Shell was lying. That made all the difference in the world. And we began to get the beginnings of answers from science, advocacy, policy, and action is what I call it. And citizen science, and it wasn't called citizen science back then. We didn't call it anything. We just said, we want to be involved in collecting samples. Now it's citizen science, kind of cute. But we just wanted to collect the samples, and we wanted to have an independent lab read them because we didn't trust EPA. Well, EPA said, no, there'll be no double sampling, and yes, we will test them, and they came back and said, yes, you were right, this is a dangerous chemical. So we began to trust EPA a little bit better after that as well. And this caused, and here they're just pictures of community people showing how it was used and how to use it. And believe it or not, on June 9th, the community was relocated. And they were relocated at a level that allowed every person to be able to buy a house because their houses were not rated in value after pollution. So, you know, I mean, if you have a house that's worth $100,000, the chemical companies start moving in, what happens to the value of your house? It goes down. So then if you get an estimate based on the pre-pollution value versus the pollution value, you can't do anything with $20,000, which is what they say is worth now. You can't buy another house. This is the first case where communities got the pre-pollution value of their homes and they were able to buy other houses. And this is Margie Richards, who also won the Goldman Prize, who was the leader of that community, standing in front of her new house. And we were all very happy, an 18-year struggle. But I wanted you to remember this picture down at the bottom, because this picture was taken in Durban, South Africa, when we were going around communities looking at how close the facilities were to communities. And in putting this slide together, I had this slide, and I looked at it and said, no, that's not Narco. So I went searching for the other, and I found it. So, I mean, it's the same situation. These companies always give us parks and places where we can hardly breathe. Your gift is always a park, and you can see this, it's the same picture, different places, but the same story. And I'm going to do this really quickly. I wanted to tell you this. The same people who are exposed to all of these chemicals are also the people who are most affected by climate change. I'm pretty certain all of you know all of this, why. I wasn't going to go into that, but I wanted to, and of course the impact on minorities and the poor are what it is, but I wanted to just bring you back to this, because these storms are happening over and over again. I have a slide that shows everyone, you know, from Katrina to Sandy to Harvey to now Michael, and there's something out in the waters right now, they tell me, which may be coming our way. But this is what anticipating Katrina looked like. People say, why didn't you leave? Well, we're trying to leave, but you try to empty out a city in 2 days or even 2 weeks. It's a very difficult thing. People ran out of gas. And these were the people who could leave. The other point is that in the city of New Orleans, it's a very poor city. Most people work in the tourist industry, and that you don't get paid until Monday. You know why? Because they say if they pay people on Friday, they won't come to work over the weekend. That's because they're paid so poorly, and there's no insurance. I don't think I would go either. If I got my money on Friday, I'm like, oh, I'm just not doing it. I'll see them on Monday. And they actually do this. They pay you on Monday, and Katrina hit on Sunday, which means poor people who live from paycheck to paycheck had no money to leave. It wasn't that they were like, oh, I'm just going to sit this out. No. We are very frightened of hurricanes in New Orleans, and it's been going on for a long time. We had just left 3 weeks earlier because of the fear of another hurricane coming, and I had 2 elderly aunts. They were old school teachers. I don't know if you all know what old black school teachers were like. They are the prissiest, most particular people in the world. You have to do everything right. Your diction must be correct, or you will get the big slap down. I had 2 of them. One had a fat cat, the other had a big fat dog. They were 86 and 82. And my cousin was in the car with them for 16 hours trying to drive to Houston, Texas. Big fat cat, big fat dog, 2 aunts, former school teachers. And when Katrina came, you know what they said? I'm just ready to go home to glory. I'm not getting back in that car. Katrina can just take me away, Lord, take me away. It was so hard to get them to leave that second time just 3 weeks earlier. But we managed, get them in the car, 2 school teachers, a fat cat, a fat dog, for another 16 hours with these old ladies, and it wasn't nothing nice. So I'm saying this, we're like middle working class black people trying to leave. Imagine what poor people were going through. I saw women, 2 sisters, in a hoopty with like 6 children between them trying to get out the city. I mean, it was unbelievable. So when you say, why didn't they leave? Yeah, right. Just hope you don't have to have that experience. This is contraflow. This was Katrina. At that time, it was the biggest one we had ever seen. Of course, we surpassed that. And these are some of the pictures so you can see how devastating, that's the pollution, how devastating it was. And yes, we do have graves on top of the ground. Because people forget just really how bad it was. That's the chemical corridor debris. And this is what it looked like on the ground for people who did not leave. It looks like a third world country with people with stuff in their hands. And you notice who's walking. All these people look like me. The majority of people left behind were black people and Vietnamese people and old people. And the people now, you can see mostly women and children and babies who were, I think it was, the intention was really good to get children to safety, but they did nothing to identify them. So babies were taken and brought someplace. Parents didn't know where they were. They were saying pedophiles had them. It was like mayhem, because we didn't do it right. The intention was certainly good to get the children out, but didn't anybody think to write on their hands or something so that we would know who they were? They did not, and it created unbelievable problems. This is in the airport, finally, and this is what it looked like when people finally were getting out. And the question then, who recovers? And I'm going to do this real quickly. Perilous consequences of policy decisions. And I'm going to take you through the first one that really made me crazy, the building plan. So I'm in Baton Rouge living, right? Bought a house there, living in Baton Rouge, and all of a sudden on the front page of The Advocate, they have this picture showing all of these green spots. That's going to be land unoccupied, green spaces. Well, guess what, y'all? My house is, where is it? Right here. So I'm looking at this map saying, who the hell decides? What the hell? I drove from Baton Rouge to New Orleans in about 40 minutes. And when I got to the city hall where everybody was meeting about this, the whole front 5 rows was filled with Vietnamese people. I'm like, damn, the Vietnamese people here. This is really hot, because they live where we live. And as I told my Vietnamese friends, I said, it's dangerous to live next to us. You should know that. And she said, we had no choice. They were forced to live with us. So we live Vietnamese. We have one of the largest Vietnamese populations in one place in the country. And so there we were. When I saw the black people were there, of course, we came a little later than what the... Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We got there a little bit later. So the first 3 rows were all Vietnamese people. And the rest of the place was black people. And, it was like this. People were like screaming. And the Vietnamese people were like this. I'm like, I never saw Asian people react like that. So I told my Vietnamese friend, I said, y'all been hanging out with us too long. Some of y'all cultural stuff is leaving. The politeness and stuff, but they were so angry. And then, the politicians are looking at Vietnamese people and black people all raising hell. So we were able to beat this back. And I would go into the details of what they were going to do. Immediate opportunity areas. All the immediate opportunity areas were areas that didn't get any water. Uptown by Tulane, all the real good white folks up there. Oh, you should see up there now. There's skateboarding in areas where there used to be gunshots going off all the time. It's amazing. But the areas that were hit by Katrina, we're not going to rebuild that right now. All those millions of dollars, most of it went to people who were not even affected by the storm. There are lessons to be learned from Katrina, but I don't see it happening. So we were able to beat back that plan, but to see the other written plan, you need to just follow the money. So we conducted a GIS analysis looking at what the plan was, all these charrettes we went to, designing our areas, and then we looked at where the money went, estimated project costs. I'm going to skip this. So this shows you the breakdown of the funding, of the funds. And this is what it really adds up to. The red is the amount of money white areas got. Yellow is the amount of money that black areas got, which, knowing how racist stuff is, that doesn't look too bad, right? But here's the problem. Oh, wait. Here's the problem. 13 of the districts are in that one little yellow box, where 3 are in the other box that got the most money. So you're looking at 13 different areas versus 3. So the majority of the money went to a much smaller area where white people live versus where we were. And so there's a great divide in income disparities. We're actually seeing black income going down while white income is going up. In fact, white income in Louisiana, in New Orleans, is higher than the national average. We got very, very wealthy people moving into the city, and we're getting poorer. So you know, there's this divide in income disparity is getting bigger rather than smaller, which is never a good thing. So we have this widened income gap. And it has affected everything. It's affected housing, public education, recreational infrastructure, food security, and medical facilities, all going in a direction that we really should not want it to go. And so New Orleans, you probably heard it, we're back. And it's just applauded for making a remarkable comeback. But I remember Bullard saying right after he said to me, if y'all don't watch out, they're going to have signs all around here saying this is where black people used to live. Guess what, y'all? That's exactly what has happened. Louis Armstrong's house is pointed out in the old historic 6th Ward. I can trace my heritage 8 generations in the city of New Orleans, from free coloreds on one side, slaves on the other side. New Orleans is older than the United States of America. And these old white neighborhoods, the 6th Ward, which is the Treme Ward, it was an area where slaves would run away to and get in there, and police wouldn't go in after them. It was a tough neighborhood. That's where Louis Armstrong came from. I grew up in the old Creole 7th Ward, as they call it. All of that is being gentrified at warp speed. And black people are being pushed out. They're not leaving, they're being pushed out. First, they're being pushed out to the middle-class black neighborhood, where I live in New Orleans East. And then after that, they're being pushed across the river into Slidell, and who knows where they're going to go. But the city is changing. And as you push black people out, what happens to your political power and strength? Seeing city council change, used to be majority black, it isn't anymore. So we're losing strength, we're losing political clout in terms of political power, we're losing all of that. And this is a trend that we see happening over and over again in places where disasters are occurring. We call it cowboy capitalism, or disaster, forgot the name of it, and I'm not going to try. I'm 71 years old. You got to give me a break sometime. Cannot remember that. You add to the mix this BP oil spill that came right after. When this happened, I actually broke down crying. I can't explain it to you, but when the BP oil spill happened, we were just getting back from Katrina, and I just broke down crying. I just almost couldn't take it anymore. And we've seen devastation of the Vietnamese fisher community in particular. And believe it or not, folks, there are black oystermen and black fishermen, and they were also devastated. So response to all of environmental racism was really the beginning of my center, the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, started in 1992, providing opportunities for everything we've talked about. But the community model is probably the most sacred of anything that we've done in developing this equal relationship between communities and researchers that has sustained us to now. We also did formalize agreements with communities. So we had memorandums of understanding so communities don't think we're going to change the world overnight, and we can't. So you're really honest with them about what you can do, and you have people sign that agreement. So we had these objectives, partnership between university and community, interaction among programs, and legacy, and we worked in these 3 areas. And we have done lots of work in all 3 of those areas. I'm just going to take you through some slides showing you some. The first ever GIS map done on toxicity and race was done by my center in the 90s, which sort of propelled most of our work, and we've done lots of other work since. Community education and training. This is like after BP, bringing the Vietnamese community in to talk with the mayor, working with communities, and so on. I've done hundreds of meetings now when I look at it. And our worker training program that's been in existence now for 25 years, training young people. And this is what the map looks like, our previous training sites, our current training sites. Our environmental careers worker training program, which used to be the minority worker training program that the Republicans forced us not to use the word minority, so we have to call it. It's the same program, but we couldn't use the word minority. You'd be surprised when you get federal grants, the things that happen. These things happen and you just morph yourself into whatever it is they want and continue doing the same work. Don't tell anybody I said that. And we've also worked in K through 12 with students. We developed a curriculum with teachers, training teachers to teach kids about EJ. We get tons of students who come in to visit with us from other universities, and we also work in elementary schools. At the college level, with our own students, we've done numerous projects in rebuilding, taking them to conferences and so on. This is after Katrina. And investing in our future. We work right now with 32 HBCUs. We have an HBCU Climate Change Consortium, and we have this initiative where we work with kids from the universities, introducing them to the global conflicts as it relates to climate change. And we have a conference that we are involved in each year. We're on our 6th conference. I'm talking now and moving the slides because I'm over time. Really to help raise awareness. And these are the universities that have been involved in our consortium. This program, the Climate Change Consortium, was really started because whenever I went to the global climate change meetings, I saw Native people, I saw Asian people, I saw Latino people, I didn't see black students. And when I did see a black student, that student didn't know they were black. You know, they were just a little bit confused about who they were. And I said, okay, we need to do something about this and do something about it right away. So we launched this, the HBCU Climate Change Consortium. I think I had $10,000 from a grant with EPA. Our first conference was 8 universities, most of them local. We have faculty mentors, the faculty members who work with students, and they prepare for our conference each year, doing research, all kinds of research. It's interdisciplinary, from artwork to bench science. And just an amazing conference. We just finished our 6th conference. So you can see what some of them look like. When the Flint thing happened, we brought the mayor in from Flint. We called it We're One with Flint. That was a really fun one that year. And this last year, the students were involved in coming up with the name for the conference, and they called it Fighting for Our Lives. And this is what it looked like. This just past September, we had 350 persons attending that conference. The next one, we also have 5 PWIs. That's a new word for me. predominantly white institutions who participated in our conference. We don't discriminate. It's an HBCU conference, but everybody's invited. And so we have lots of young white scientists working in the area of EJ and climate change. They are also invited. It is an amazing experience. And that one was just this past September, so that's the last of it. And you can learn more about our work by going here, and thank you very much.
Of us can see you. It's just a big blinding light at the moment. I want to say thank you so much for being here. Honestly, I think the topics that you touched on, I think the problems that you raised, I think are things that we need to be thinking about more often. I think there are lots of us here who want to fight the good fight, but sometimes lose hope. But what has kept you hopeful? What has kept you fighting this good fight? And kept you laughing and finding joy in the work that you do?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm really a happy person. It's part of my nature is to be happy, and I'm the glass is half full kind of person, and you cannot be in this struggle if you don't have that kind of personality. If you have that other personality, this will kill you. This is not the kind of fight you want to be in if you have real trouble being happy, because people die every day. I've lost an unbelievable amount of people that I work with. When we start working with them, they're sick, they have cancer or something. The people who work with me in this struggle, I've lost many of them. I think Damu Smith, who I always remember, they oftentimes don't have insurance. There are people who are not interested in money. I'm not one of those, though. Let me just be clear. I'm not one of the people who are not interested in money. Oh, yes, I'm interested in money. I have to feed my family. I have children and so on. So I'm on the academic side. But the grassroots side, these are the people who work for nonprofits. Most times they're not paid very much. They just don't have, that interest. They aren't interested in designer shoes and, all that kind of stuff. And we lose a lot of them because they don't take care of themselves. So I'm 71. I'm not 71. I'm 70 and 1 month. My birthday was in October. This is November. No, it's still October. I'm not even 1 month, y'all. I'm still 70. Right. That made me happy. Yeah, these numbers are starting to really bother me. But I'm mostly healthy. And I think the thing that makes me happy is that the communities that we work with are better when we leave. And you make friends for life. Even if you don't win, the fact that you were there and you cared and you fought with them makes them feel so much better. And the other side of it is that I work with young people, which always gives me hope, because they're not me yet, but I'm working to get them here, if you know what I mean. And I can see it you know, I can see it. I can see them becoming not just like me, but better than me, because you all know how to use a computer and media and all of that stuff. And I'm so happy you know how to do it and I don't have to do it. So when I see young people interested in justice, interested in increasing civic participation, so everybody in here is going to vote, right? Yeah, I got out of a Uber in Atlanta because the guy told me he didn't vote. I say, pull over, like right here. I want out of this car. It's like, miss what? I'm saying, I want out. If you don't vote, something is wrong with you. People died so that you could have the ability to do so. And everything that's happening to you is happening because you don't participate in the process. And this lesser of two evils thing, what? When have we ever had any other choice? That's what I keep thinking, though. My whole life, it was always, okay, so which white person? Is this white person better than that white person? The only time I went to the polls really happy to vote was when Obama ran for president. That's the only time I've ever been just elated to vote. So this expectation that every time you go to the polls is going to be somebody you're just happy about, really? These are politicians. You are picking the best of two evils to some extent, and you should be happy that you have that choice. So that wasn't the question. I went off on it. That's something I wanted to say. Vote.
I'm a geosciences professor. That's me, Jose Constantine, for those who don't know me. And you know, in our field, what we do, we can really easily live a life where we don't think about the issues that you brought up today, where we can insulate ourselves from the problems that many people face, you know, in this world. But the more we know, the more I've learned, the more I feel committed to do something. And there are a lot of people here in this audience who want to do something at all kinds of levels. And I think, honestly, I selfishly could use your advice. What should we do up here in the Berkshires in this, you know, relatively cold, isolated place? Like, how should we, you know, muster up the courage to do something? What does that look like?
Well, I just left a conference called Educational Rendezvous. They're geosciences, and they are very active, very involved. And one of our faculty mentors is a geoscientist, and he's using GIS mapping in high schools, dealing with community resilience, making certain that poor communities have heat shelters for when it's hot or when there's a storm, where to go. He has the kids mapping all of these things and then working with Red Cross. I mean, geoscientists are really important in this particular climate that we're in with climate change, and helping people to understand the causes of global warming and how they may be affected, and being able to show them with maps, you know, where you are compared to other things that you may need is wonderful. So I don't expect everybody to be a loud activist, you know, like I am. I'm a loud activist, but I'm a sociologist. This is what we do. But I've seen artists, I've seen do amazing work, poets, you know, speaking out about the environment. I've seen scientists who are really driven in their work to deal with climate resiliency, like the Union of Concerned Scientists. They are putting out just remarkable stuff related to sea level rise and flooding and the cost of all of this. You know, with climate change, who will lose the most? And it's poor communities with houses that are completely destroyed by storms and flooding. You know, you can look at Florida, what just happened. That was a poor white community that got completely wiped out. How many of you think they really had flood insurance? You know, you watch how many of them are able to come back. They'll end up selling. The area will be completely gentrified in about 5 years. So all of that kind of work is being done by every scientist that you can think of. They're working in the area to deal with, recovery, resilience, ecosystem restoration, you name it. I've met people doing everything that in every discipline, they're doing something. There are committed scientists in every discipline. So I say just find those and begin working with them.
And there are lots of us here, and I think rather than me keep peppering you with questions, I know that you guys have questions of Beverly, and I know Isaiah Blake, I see him, and I think about Isaiah as someone who's really working hard to make change happen, and maybe has come up against, things that try to slow that down. But I don't know if you have a question of that.
Oh, that's Isaiah. Oh, the hair, yes, Isaiah.
Thank you again for coming and speaking with us. Thank you, President Constantine, for putting me on the spot like that. One of the questions that sort of I've been battling with here, like I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and so I typically do food justice work in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And so now I feel like I've been moved away from the ground that I am connected to most of my life, and now I'm here. And so when you're talking about this university model and how sort of the university can become sort of grounded in its community, what is, I wouldn't know if you can go through the logistics of what that looks like, because here at the college, the college does a great job of distracting students from the nature of the community, of not letting students get connected to the community. So all we get to worry about is our books and the theory of the world, even though we have real serious communities with serious issues happening around us, but we don't get to know that. The school will joke about this idea called the purple bubble, but it's a really serious, violent idea of how we get objected from our local community. So I want to know how we can bring community risk and what's the logistics of that model here.
So do you all have to do community service hours? Well, that's one way that you stay connected. So a lot of I won't say a lot. I can name some schools that do really fantastic work. Spelman College is one of them, where the girls there have to do so many community service hours every year, and it forces them to become connected to the community. At a university like this, I would say, I can tell you how I did it, but I was a faculty member. But at a university like this, you need to find a faculty member who is willing to become the sort of mentor in whatever it is you decide to do. You need a faculty member who will buy into what you're doing. Now, it's usually faculty members trying to get students to buy into service from where I sit. But if that's not the way it is, then you need to try to find a faculty member or contact me. And I will make certain that you're connected to our Hbcu consortium, where there are faculty members who are connected. For instance, we're getting ready to go to Poland for the COP in Poland. And we're launching a number of case studies that I did on impacted communities at that particular event. And we're not taking many students. So it was 52 of us that went to COP21 in Paris, 52. And everywhere we went, people were stunned to see us, but young people got a chance to talk to state departments. They talked to Chinese people who represented China, the island states, how to work with communities who are literally sinking. I mean, they're underwater already. They're not on the way under, they are there. And the students keep up with one another about activities. Every march we've had, we brought students there. The Climate March, we went to both of them, the one in New York and then the one in DC. We brought about 110 kids. So on every campus, you find students who are interested. So my thing is that try to connect you with other students on other campuses who are connected and doing things. And if I can help you do that, that's fine. But for the faculty members who ask what they might do, that might just be something. I'm just, if you want to get involved, then, and get involved with students. I really believe that, and I said this in the class earlier, this work is not for every student. It's not. Some kids are here to come here, go to school, and get out. That's all they're interested in. And their parents have told them, you got 4 years. That's what I told mine. You got 4 years. The 5th year is on you. So you're not going to get everybody, but you don't need everybody. If you had everybody, you'd have nothing but trouble, not a dissension, why you did it this way. You just need a solid core of about 5 to 10 people. That's all you need to get anything done on campus. And at least one faculty member who will work with you to get the space you need, to get an audience of the administrators, I don't know if you should listen to me. I got kicked out of school for demonstrating. Grambling kicked me out. I was one of those loudmouth, militant kind of people. So I don't know if you should listen to me. Your parents might say, did you listen to that crazy woman? But I recognize that that's all you need, is about 5 to 10. This is a small campus, right? So you only need 5. We needed at least 10. So you only need about 5 people, and connect with people outside of this campus that are really doing things, and there are quite a few. And at our conference, we have a lot of black students who are at PWIs who connect with students at HBCUs, where they have a lot more people in common interests and values and so on. And, that works out well. And we have a lot of white students who are really interested in justice, and they find us to find common values in people,
Do you see this, this movement, this push to, fight for environmental justice? Is this growing? Do you see it over the past 40 years or so that more and more people are on board, and that's where the change is happening?
Oh, it's amazing. When we first started, if you Googled environmental justice, you might get 2 articles. Now there are literally thousands. It amazes me when I see how this field has grown. It's amazing that you can get a PhD with a concentration in environmental justice. And the numbers, I try to show the map on the numbers of EJ organizations that have grown. Some of them, it may say that they're environmental groups, but they really are EJ groups, because they're all dealing with justice issues inside of communities. And so environmental justice is everything. We don't divide people out really, except the big green organizations. We have to fight with them all the time, because they get all the money and they hire one black person and say, we're doing EJ. So that's a continuing fight. And then the poor black person that was put into place, they're getting hisses from everybody, all the other black people, because you're just using you or taking all the money, that kind of stuff. So that fight still goes on, and I'm good at that fight. So I don't need your help with that. But it's historical, that fight is. But all of the big green organizations now are talking about EJ, environmental justice, which was something we had to fight to get, and the organizations that were doing EJ fired and shut down offices that were. Earth Justice did that, shut down its office in New Orleans. Greenpeace did it when they were really doing great work. The next thing you know, they're shut down. Now they're embracing it. So it's been a fight, a 20-year fight with the environmental groups to really, deal with EJ and understand diversity. And diversifying doesn't mean hiring one black or one Latino, one Native or one Asian in your organization. That's not diversifying. And so we've been preaching that for a long time, and it's catching on. So I would say the answer to your question is that it has grown immensely.
Questions from you guys? What do you see? I mean, this IPCC report that just came out, and scary numbers in this report about how things are going to play out. How do you see? What are the next big challenges, and where should we be focused? What are the next steps?
Well, the numbers have been scary for a long time. I mean, you had 350. Remember that we had to try to get there. Now it's 1.5 in 12 years. They've been scary for a long time, and like you say, the IPC, all those alphabets report. Who knows that but us? So it's all about educating people. People don't really know. And now in this era of fake news, it's hard for people to embrace anything. But I will say this to you. People in the city of New Orleans who experienced Katrina, people in Texas that experienced Harvey, people where they experienced Sandy, they believe in climate change. And, like once you're hit, all of this craziness, like I don't know the science, but I know this ain't natural. What just happened has never happened before. And they tell me it snowed here in June. Is that true? It snowed in June. It was almost 100 degrees, 90-something in May in New Orleans. For one thing, growing up, it never reached 90-some degrees in New Orleans. 87, that was Texas. And now in May, we've been in the 90s the whole summer, which is, none of this is normal. And we got another hurricane in November. There's one out there headed to Mexico. And then they say maybe Houston. And then, that's New Orleans right around the corner once it gets there. None of this is natural, and people are beginning to notice. Cab drivers, this weather is unpredictable. They say it's climate change. Or things are warming up. When you get those conversations, you should have them with people. Because they're not there. Like, there are those of us who watch the news all the time and everything. That's not normal. That's what you have to recognize. That you're not just normal. I watch MSNBC all day long, the Weather Channel. Other people say, did you watch that? Have you seen? No. What is that? Because I'm not watching television. Most people watch television. They have their programs, their regular nights, their whatever. And then there are crazy people like us that just watch the news all the time and weather. You have to remember that's not normal. So how do you get that word out? You have to. It becomes normal, but it's not. So we have to start educating people. Education is the key. And I hate to say it, but your generation, the young people, you all have a big job ahead. I mean, it's just a mess. It's just a mess. Politically, what you have to deal with, and what's true, who do you trust? In my generation, we never trusted the police, but we trusted the police. I don't know how to explain that to you. We never trusted the police, but we trusted the police. We didn't feel like all police departments were corrupt from the top out. No. But we didn't trust them in certain areas. It was like, okay, in this arena, I trust the police. In this one, you need to ask that question again. Or you need to investigate a little bit more. It never was, we need to get rid of the police. You don't think that I know there's some dangerous black people out there I need to be protected from? Are you crazy? You want me to get rid of the police? No, I don't want you to get rid of the police, but I want the police to be fair and work for justice. So this kind of crazy extreme, you don't want the FBI. What? The FBI has done some terrible stuff under Hoover, who, as truth be told, was really black. Y'all heard that? Oh, you didn't know that? I got all the backstories. Hoover got some cousins down south who've been saying this for years. And they were afraid to speak because they were afraid they would be killed. He looks just like my father-in-law. I was like, oh yeah, he's black. Hoover. And Hoover, he did so many terrible things with the FBI. So yeah, do I trust the FBI? And sometimes not. It depends upon what the issue is. And I'm not going to say no, but I want to investigate a little bit more. Y'all got to deal with people saying the FBI don't believe nothing they say. Not nothing. What? Nothing? Well, here's the tape. It's on tape. You still don't believe it? No. You got some problems. We don't know, people who don't know what's real and what's not real. I know what's real because I investigate. You say something, well, so who wrote this? And who do they work for? And who paid for this study? That's the way it used to be in my day when you had to investigate the background of the researcher to determine how much bias was in the study. Now it's, no, I'm not voting for Hillary because she has a baby porn ring. What? This happened on my campus at Dillard. She has a baby porn. What? Where did you? It was on the internet. What? You believe that? Oh, it's a reputable source. Really? Why would Hillary need a baby porn? She needs money? She's just a pervert. What is it? I mean, it's just craziness. I deal with this every day with stuff. And you all, that's, old people like me, we don't do that. We don't do that. Young people, it just pops up on the, something's constantly bing, bing, more and more over and over again. So y'all got to figure that out. I can't do it. I'm just going to keep doing what I do and the way I do it. So y'all figure that out, okay? All right.
Got a question here?
Can't hear you. Damien.
I had a question about the community that was relocated. Were there any legal actions taken against Shell, and do you see that as a viable method of holding?
Yes. So the settlement wasn't made in court. We filed lawsuits, but they settled outside of court. So they paid for the relocation. They paid for all the new housing. People wanted lifetime help. They didn't get that, but they got a large amount of money that was put in with a foundation to do activities for communities also impacted by the oil industry. That's what they got.
Do you see that as an effective way of targeting companies that are making all this money and not being environmentally?
Well, it was effective in that case. Every case is different. It was effective in that way, and I gave you a short version of it, but they went to court numerous times and lost because there was a racial dimension to it. That is, the community was about 4 blocks. The community, those people bought property on the diamond plantation where they were former slaves. So these were descendants of that plantation. Shell came in and bought land right up to the fence line of 4 blocks, and on the other side of Shell was a white community, most of whom worked for Shell and were retired. They were all sick and dying too. But every time we went to court, they said they weren't sick. The chemicals hadn't bothered them at all. But when the settlement came, when they won the settlement, they wanted in. Then they were sick and dying and all of this. And Shell decided that it was going to appease the situation by only buying off 2 blocks of diamond and giving 2 blocks of the white community. And we said, oh, hell no. Hell to the no. And Maxine Waters put in a call to the president of Shell. And she said, I think you should buy out the white community. but you had better buy out all 4 of the blocks of the black community, and that's exactly what happened. It was a long fight. It's interesting. It's colorful. It's a movie, to tell you the truth. It took 18 years. I started working with them in 92. And they had been working even before I started with them, and it was settled in 2002, I think. 2002 is when they were finally relocated. They lost at least 5 different cases in court because of the white people saying, well, no, that's not true. It's a long, so when you add that racial dynamic in there, it complicates things. That 3/5 rule is still around, if you know what I mean.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a historical problem here. A storm hit this land up here back in 11, and it wiped out a poor neighborhood here, a mobile home park. 267 poor people who lived in this town were wiped out. Floods came down. There was a big effort to relocate, and we were looking for land to relocate people back in their hometown here in Williamstown. And people fought to lock up the land so that people could not live back in Williamstown. They were told to go to North Adams or Adams, and we fought to build affordable housing. But FEMA had a sunset clause on. Unless they were relocated by a certain time, then that money would evaporate. And so they had to settle and move them out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the locals here and some people who work here fought so that these people were not, we could not build affordable housing here in the land here. And it wasn't till the college gave us land, so we were to build some housing here.
Yeah.
So we have environmentalists here that think, and so I just want to let people know that there's a history of environmental justice around affordable housing right here in this town.
That is repeated over and over again. After Katrina, all of the housing projects were torn down. Those housing projects were built, they were World War II, the work project. A lot of things fell down. The bricks were standing, we called them the bricks. They got water in them, but they were standing. Nothing flew off the bricks. But they decided they needed to be condemned. And that was in cahoots with HUD and FEMA to relocate poor people from in the city out. So they came back with what they call affordable housing. 8 years, for 8 years, people who lived there before could live there with vouchers. After 8 years, that city property is turned over to the owners, which means that after 8 years, hardly any poor people will be living in these now beautiful apartments, and that's going on all over the city. New Orleans was the first place to ever have housing projects. It came out of Tulane's School of Social Work. So we had more housing projects per capita than any other city because it all began there. And that's how they've been able to get rid of a large percentage of the black people in the city of New Orleans by not bringing back the housing projects and they got rid of the one-to-one replacement because HUD used to rule that if you tear down one unit of affordable housing, as they called it, it had to be replaced. When the storm started, they got rid of that clause. And so it was okay for you to get rid of whatever number of units of affordable housing you have without replacing it. So the replacement clause was gone, and that's all they needed, and they're off and running. It's happening everywhere.
Well, Dr. Wright, I can say with confidence that I speak for all of us here. Thank you for all the work that you've done in your career for people of color, for poor people, for all of us. And thank you for being here today to share your story, to keep us focused on on the real fight that needs to be had. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.